Hey, everybody, welcome back to Time Out for Anesthesia. I'm your host, David Henderson, and I am here with a special guest today. Super excited to welcome him, Daniel Dura from Graphium Health. I'm going to call him Danny because that's how I know him. Danny, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Hey Dave, nice to finally be here.
Nice to have you. I think the finally comes with some nuance. I think it's important for me to tell you you've been invited for a long time.
That's true. No, my schedule's definitely the difficulty there, but no,
I
it's
know
awesome. I'm actually really excited to be on this and
I
talk
know
to you
you're a
about it.
busy man, but I really am. I'm super glad we could have you on board. And before we get really into anything grapheme related, I want to start with kind of your history. What You're not an anesthesiologist, and
No.
so tell us a little bit about your career that brought you to a point of getting involved with anesthesia technology.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, I think 10 years ago, well, maybe 15 years ago, if you told me I'd be doing stuff in healthcare, I would have doubted you. I started off actually. I was going to school studying international politics. Really had no plan of even getting into the software industry. I had done computer programming in high school in the 90s and in the early 90s, and so I had learned how to program computers and things, and always loved it. But went to college for something completely different. And but while I was in college, this was the dot-com boom days. I got a job offer to go work for Fujitsu, and that kind of kicked off my career in the software industry. And I've kind of never looked back since. I left Fujitsu after a year or two and went to a company called Macromedia, where I worked on a product called Flash, which most people know is that thing that bugged them to download, which we
Oh
did a
yeah.
very good job of that. So I worked on Flash for many
Affectionate. It's
years.
affection. I
Yes.
affectionately remember Flash because it was in a time where I needed something to do in school, and it was
Yes.
like behind all of the browser-based games that I could pull up.
Yeah, no, and it was honestly, it was probably the highlight of my career was working on Flash at a time when, I mean, we were having such a huge impact on just the internet and the development of the internet and video. And I mean, Flash is really what enabled YouTube and a lot of these other
Right.
products. And we were kind of right there in the middle of it. And it's funny when you're doing those things, you don't realize it at the time, like the impact you're having on people. And suddenly you kind of look back and you're like, holy cow, I mean, we were doing millions and millions of downloads every day, and enabling people to create like all these just incredibly cool experiences. And I played a small part in that, and it was a highlight. I got to work with some just incredible people. The people who hired me taught me a lot, and taught me honestly to love product development and software, and what you could build and what you could do. And so that developed over many years. We actually ended up being merged with Adobe. So most people will think of Adobe Flash. It
Right.
was actually
Hmm.
Macromedia Flash originally. And we just had a great time for many years. I ended up being a what they call a platform evangelist, and so my job was to basically, in a sense, preach the good word of Adobe and preach the good word of Flash in particular. And so I traveled the world speaking at conferences and doing events, and it was an absolutely awesome time. But that kind of came to an end, kind of in the end of the 2000s, and I actually left Adobe, started a consulting firm, and that's kind of where Graphium kind of started kicking off. But I don't know. You want me to tell a little more of that story, David?
Yeah. No. That's obviously my next question is how do you go from one place to another? Tell us the story.
Yeah, it was, we started a consulting firm, and that grew pretty rapidly. And, that's actually where we met the wonderful David Henderson, is when we were doing the consulting firm, and doing some really cool projects for a lot of very big organizations. And a lot were big Fortune 500 companies. And so we had, Neiman Marcus and Procter and Gamble and Northrop Grumman and DFW Airport, which is, where we met you. And we were just working on some of the coolest software projects that frankly I've ever worked on in my life, and just building really interesting solutions to people's problems using interactive technology and data. We'd use a lot of data warehousing technology to solve people's analytics problems. And while we were doing that, we would always get people that would come up to us and say, "Hey, I got this great idea for a product, right?" And and many of them were good ideas. Probably not. There really would be a hard they'd have a hard time kind of getting product market fit with some of them. And we'd be like, well, if you want to pay us to build it, we'd be happy to. And that's where we
Sure.
met, Dr. Zavaleta. And, we got introduced to him through a mutual contact. And this is back in probably about 2009, 2010. We met and, instantly, he kind of described some of the problems that he was seeing in the anesthesia world. And, it was one of those moments, I think, in our career where you're just skeptical. Jeff was kind of telling us, well, they don't have reports. And when they want reports, they have to wait months. And, there's really not a good electronic solution for capturing this data. And they're still using these very kind of archaic systems. And frankly, at first we were like, it can't be that bad. Like it just, it really can't. I mean,
Sure.
we were used to working with like Procter and Gamble, where you walk into the boardroom, and I mean it's just layered with thousands of data points, and everything is a data-driven decision. Procter and Gamble is very well known for that kind of way that they run their business. And so we were coming from that and go, looking at hospitals and just, we were very skeptical that they were as bad as Jeff was kind of, telling us they
Well,
were.
yeah, because if you're like me, the general consumer, you assume it's hospital, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh
healthcare,
yeah.
they have
This
all
is
kinds of
life and
money.
death.
They have, yeah, and it's important,
Yeah.
So when you think, yeah, they probably have the same level of stuff as somebody like Procter and Gamble, why not?
Yeah, and they didn't. And that
Right.
was, I remember the first time Jeff took me kind of on a walk around the hospital and kind of introduced me to people. I mean, we were just, no, there's something here. And so that back in 2010, we kind of kicked off this thing that we call Graphium today. That's kind of grown to what it is. So it was a
Yeah.
fun journey.
Right. Yeah, no, it's been a journey. How long has that been ago when you were talking? When was the first conversations that you had with Jeff?
It was funny because Jeff and I were actually looking at this the other day. We just happened to be going through some old emails and kind of happened to see it. And I think it was it was into 2009, beginning of 2010 when we first met. We started putting together kind of our plans for doing something in 2010, 2011. And at the time, we ended up just deciding to bootstrap the company, and we thought there was a big enough opportunity, and me and Randy Barker, who's another one of our business partners, we kind of brought the kind of business and software side and technology side to it. Jeff and Sam Kleinman, who's the other partner on the other side, they're both pediatric anesthesiologists, and they kind of brought the clinical knowledge and the clinical expertise and the informatics expertise. And so it was just kind of this perfect marriage. And it took us about 2 years to kind of really get to market, to really kind of figure out what we wanted to do, to test it. I remember we were we actually went through two versions of the product before we actually went to market, where we built one and kind of learned a lot from it, and then built another one and deployed them at hospitals, and kind of saw how it was going to be used. And because it was obviously really important that this be something that was going to meet that need, and that providers were going to want to use. And by 2013, we got our first clients, and it's been off to the races ever since. So
I first of all, I love the story, and I think how fortuitous it was that those specific minds came together, because I think you're a brilliant mind. I also, Dr. Zavaleta has been on the show a lot, and he just has a brilliant mind, not just a clinically brilliant mind, but his ability to kind of marry the things that are needed from a clinical perspective with
yeah,
a data and analytics perspective. And for all those minds to come together, I just think is insanely valuable. But what I think you guys have done the best is you've responded to specific needs. And what I mean by
yeah,
that is you haven't just said, hey, these people need like electronic paper,
yeah,
right? It seems like it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it began with no. This area of healthcare needs to improve.
yeah.
And the way that you do that is through data. And the way you do that is you collect the right kind of data. Is that
No
match
doubt.
with
I
your
mean,
needs?
yeah, 100%. I mean, the reality is, I when I was at Adobe and Macromedia, and I spent some time as a product manager. I mean, everything we did was driven by the customer. Everything. We there were definitely some times when you kind of have to interpret a little bit what a customer is doing and kind of understand, kind of read between the lines of what they were saying. But it all began with that: are we going to fundamentally meet the need of a customer? And whether it was, a coffee shop or an airline, or I mean, I did projects with like Walt Disney World Resorts or whatever it was, or a hospital, it's no different, right? You have to look at like who your customer is, and that's, a lot of companies will come out, especially in the healthcare space, and they'll bring one or the other. Got good tech guys who understand the technology and know how to build a good technical solution, or you have a doctor, who understands the workflow. But having those two together allows us to step into the shoes of a provider, step into the shoes of an administrator, and kind of say, what is the real need here? We can kind of read between the lines and understand it. But B, what is the best way to build it, right? Because if you can't do
Right.
both, right, you're gonna build something that either nobody's gonna want, or something that really doesn't work and isn't
Right.
scalable or isn't maintainable. And so, we really got lucky, kind of bringing all of us together, to do this. And that's, I think, really what's led to a lot of our success. A lot of people ask us like, well, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Why don't you build your system this way, or why don't you build this feature? And it's like, well, we have to have a meeting of the minds, right? We have to have the clinical side, we have to have the technical side, we have to have the business side all come together. And that's why I think, we've been as successful as we have, right, in doing this. And it's been fun,
Yeah.
when you have that product market fit, especially in healthcare space. I mean, you're making a big impact on people. You're helping providers who, are not as frustrated with the tools they're using. I mean, that's a big, belief of ours. Like, it shouldn't frustrate the providers, which in turn is having a huge impact on the experience patients are having. And
Right.
that's what's really rewarding about doing it that way. So
Well, and it's neat, I think, now to have arrived. Now we're at 10, 11, 12 years after
yeah,
after just the thought of it to development. And now now we're in, 500 some odd facilities across the US and things like that. But
yeah.
I'd love to find out from you, what changes have you seen in the meantime? I mean, now we're talking about a time when the iPad, maybe the first version had just come on the scene, kind of, and
Oh
nobody
yeah.
really knew what to do with it yet. And we weren't on the iPad at first, but what big changes come to mind over the last
Yeah.
decade?
No, healthcare, I mean, it's really interesting when, like I said, I started my career kind of in the 90s. And, back then, when I got to Macromedia at the time, we were kind of in this kind of like Web 1.0 world, right? It was HTML pages. There really wasn't HTML, web browser based applications, right? That just wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And that's not that long ago. I mean, we're talking about 20 years ago. And then, in the early 2000s, we kind of quickly moved into this world where suddenly web-based applications, became a big thing. And then into the 2010s, where mobile applications became a thing. But again, very early on, even in Graphium's, life, hospitals were not interested in cloud-based software solutions at all. They wanted on-prem. They wanted solutions that they could put into a server room in their, in their building. And frankly, they weren't. There was no support for mobile. Mobile was kind of a new
Yeah.
thing.
Well, the cloud itself was still kind of this concept that not everybody was.
Yep.
I mean, if you were really into it, you could understand and be comfortable with. But to somebody like me and the users and the doctors that we were talking to early on, they were like, "What do you mean it's in the cloud? I'm not okay with that."
Yeah, no, there were like huge security concerns. In fact, the very first version of the Graphium platform was an on-prem solution. Like, it was not cloud-based. And the reason we did that was because most of the hospitals would not have bought it. And
Right.
so, very quickly though, we started pushing people into the cloud. And so we've seen this big transition from, originally it was Windows-based tablets, these, motion computing tablets, which was the only tablet really on the market that would meet the need, and on-prem solutions to a cloud-based mobile, iPad, self-service, kind of solution. And the interesting thing is, in other industries, this kind of transition into, using these kinds of products happened a lot earlier. And it took about 10 years, and these are companies that were using SAP and Oracle, and then they moved into using more cloud-based solutions and, quote, what we kind of call in healthcare, these best of breed solutions. Well, now, healthcare is just now kind of having to come to terms with that. And so, while we've definitely seen more acceptance for the cloud, more acceptance for, mobile solutions, that doesn't seem to be a hang up. It's only really in the last few years, 2 or 3 years, and a lot of this was driven due to COVID, where now they're opening up saying, hey, look, we just need the best solution to meet X need. I will take whatever's on the market, and I will find it and I will bring that into my hospital. That's really what's I think is going to drive kind of what happens over the next 5 years, right? Because no longer is it, well, we just go to the big guys. We're going to go to the big five and we're going to buy software from them. Now it's, man, I need a telehealth solution tomorrow, right? And I don't have
Right.
time to implement a incredibly complex thing. Look, here's a solution. It's HIPAA compliant. Let's get that in tomorrow and start using it so we can create better experiences for our patients. And so that's going to start. It's taken healthcare a little bit longer. Healthcare is
Uh-huh.
always lags. They lag behind and they take a little longer to do things. But now, especially due to COVID and what's going to happen over the last few years, it's speeding up rapidly.
Yeah. And I don't think, we can apologize for that, but I don't think we're surprising any of our any of our listeners
No.
by saying healthcare kind of lags behind in these things. And, somewhat to their credit, I think
Yeah.
when you're in charge of people's lives, there's something that's going to make you move a little bit more carefully.
No doubt. No
Um,
doubt.
and there's, some of the laws and requirements that come along, like HIPAA, are sometimes
Yep.
just a little bit murky, right? Where a HIPAA was established to tell you in a positive way, this is how you can transport information. But what it looked like to everybody else is this is how we restrict you moving information, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
No
those
doubt.
kind of, we've seen some developments over those that I think just kind of bogged down some processes.
No doubt.
You
And
know what I
there's
mean?
and like you said, I mean there's a reason for it. There's a reason things move a little slower and people had to become comfortable with it, right? The
Right.
the the hospital IT departments, the clinical staff, everybody had to kind of become comfortable with the idea that we're going to introduce new workflows, new technologies, and you don't again, when somebody's life is in your hands, you don't want to disrupt what they're doing. That
Right.
being said, I think now people are getting more comfortable with ideas like, what, this actually can help, right? And if we do it in a careful way and we make sure we kind of, are working with vendors who we can trust, then you have a lot of opportunity to improve what's happening. And as we all know, and again, I don't think this is shocking to anybody who's listening to this, healthcare, we have a lot to improve, right? Especially in the
Right.
back office and how we operate things and how we create more affordable care, how we create safer care. We all care about those things. Like
Right.
even Graphium. I mean, sure, we run a business, but we care about enabling our customers to be better at what they're doing, so that patients can have better experiences, so patients have more affordable experiences. And so I think, like I said, I think the next 5 years is going to be really telling. We're really at the beginning of that curve. It's taken us a while to get here. We've
Sure.
we've kind of plugged through it, but like I said, I mean, we're seeing a lot of uptick in the industry where people are calling us, going like, "Look, we just need to get something in." And I've talked to other startups as well who are seeing the same thing, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be part of that, and new things are going to
Yeah.
come out of it.
Totally agree. And I guess my final kind of challenge question for you then would be, okay, so now we're doing this uptick over the next 5 years. People have gotten more comfortable with
Yeah.
shopping for technology and finding the right solution, not just with the big players, but realizing there's kind of a bigger market. What in your mind is gonna be what in your mind are going to be the differentiators? What's
Yeah.
going to make different vendors rise to the top in this kind of next 5 year uptick?
Well, I think it's it always comes down to the simple things, right? It's how responsive is the vendor to the client, right? I mean, how
Yes.
are they really listening to the client? And that's something that's sometimes hard to do because a lot of times you'll find vendors who will come in, and I see this even when we're trying to, pull vendors into our business. They try to come in and they want to just tell you that they have the perfect solution for everything. But there's a
Right.
certain level of transparency and honesty that has to exist because given the proliferation of different solutions, I mean, if you look at, let's take a look at like what's happened in the marketing and sales world, right? I mean, there are literally, you know, thousands and thousands of different solutions. Why? I mean, a lot of them are very successful. Why do they all exist? Well, it's because certain solutions fit certain needs in a different way, right? And
Right.
depending on your business, you can find one that fits what you're doing, but what that requires is a certain level of trust between the vendor and the customer to say, look, here's what we're good at and here's what we're not good at. And I'm the vendor is going to challenge you on what do you really need, right? And then the customer is going to challenge the vendor, like, hey, I really need this. I do. Here's my use case for this. But the most important thing is that that dialogue exists between the vendor and the customer so that they can find the right solution. And sometimes, I mean, we've done this with some customers. Well, we literally just tell them, like, this isn't the right solution for you, right? You need something different. Maybe you should use that thing that's on site already. Whereas other times, they'll come to us and say, we really think we need this feature. And we challenge them a little on it. We say, well, look, we don't have that feature. That's something that we've decided is not on our roadmap right now. Let's talk about why you think you need that. And maybe I can challenge that a little bit. And it's not because I think you've done anything wrong with your business. It's not because I think, there's something wrong there. But it's because, I want to make sure that if we are going to work together, we meld. Like there is a meeting of the minds on what we can help with and what we can't. And if you keep extremely focused on what is the primary thing that you're trying to solve, and that vendor meets that, then don't hesitate. And that's the one thing I think a lot of times we see in healthcare is people will hesitate because they want to kind of hold back. It's like, don't hesitate. Find a vendor who's willing to work with you. Maybe they're willing to give you an opt out. If it doesn't work out the way you think it is. Always be wary of the 4-year contracts. That's in this kind of industry that just isn't necessary. Let's talk about getting you a solution that's going to meet your need. If it doesn't meet your need, let's give you an ejection handle so that you can get out safely and find the thing that you do. And so
right. Yeah, really good call. And I think that last piece that you just spoke to speaks to the expectation of the consumer right now anyway, right? Yeah. Almost everything I have on my phone right now, if I'm paying for it, I'm paying $4.99 a month. And if I want to get out of it, I just cancel my subscription, right? And it's become part of what I expect when I'm looking at these things. And when we talk about kind of healthcare systems lagging behind, a lot of times you're going to be missing that piece when it's come to be what you expect everywhere else in life.
100%. Yeah. And I agree 100%. And it's one of those things I think we get fooled into kind of believing a little bit that these things have to be complex and therefore they have to come with like very oppressive terms, or it's like that doesn't have to be, right? I mean, there are companies out there, you can go sign up for, a salesforce.com account, you can go sign up for something and you're not necessarily going to be locked in, right? It's like, let's figure out, the vendor's basically saying, let me try to earn your business, right? Let me try to prove to you that we can help you. And if we can't, what does it benefit me to have a customer who's frustrated with the experience they're having? It's my job as the vendor to earn your trust, to make sure that you're getting what you need out of the platform. Sometimes I think it's funny. We'll call up customers and tell them flat out, like, hey, you're not getting what you need out of this platform right now. Right now, let us help you. Let us show you. But it's one of those things where it's incumbent upon us, and I kind of say this to other startup founders too. It's incumbent on us to earn their business, right? We have no right to their money, right? That we have no right to their business. We have to earn it, and you have to work really hard. That means understanding their needs. We have a big belief inside Graphium that we're knowledgeable, and that's kind of one of our core, values. And that knowledge is not just about, how to build software. It's not about, how to run a marketing campaign. It's about being knowledgeable about our customers' businesses. It doesn't matter if you're the lowest level software engineer, you need to understand anesthesia. Go spend a day with an anesthesiologist. Go understand what their day's like, their frustrations, their desires. And if we do that, again, we'll be able to connect with them. We'll earn their trust. We'll earn their business. That's how you build a successful business.
Yeah. Totally right, Danny. Man, it's been awesome having you on the show. You always have the best things to say. And I'm so glad you could make it. I hope you'll come on for another episode soon.
Anytime. I'm here.
You say that. I'm gonna hold you to it. You just
get on my calendar. That's the key. That's the key.
That's right. Well, thank you again, Danny. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your time. And we will catch you guys next time on next week's episode of Time Out for Anesthesia. Take care.